Well, moving right along, let's go over to the other side of the top of the camera. And with that one, we've got a couple of settings. One, you've got the drive mode release button. So there's a small button here on the front of the top camera, and by pushing and holding that, you can cycle through the different drive modes as well as a few other features in the camera. To begin with, the first one is S, which stands for single advance. You depress the shutter release, the camera fires one shot and then stops. You have to lift your finger up to fire it again. The second setting, continuous low, allows you to fire a sequence of shots, but not up to the optimum speed of the camera. And if you really want to capture peak of action, as I always shoot continuous high, I can shoot up to 5 frames a second and really capture those moments, both the wingtips up and down as a bird's flying or a bear running through a stream.
Or a basketball player running down the court.
Absolutely. Any kind of action. The next setting is the live view. If you push the release button and turn till you see LV, that kicks you into live view mode. Depress the shutter release and it lifts the mirror up, and now you're looking through the viewfinder and can see the image on the rear screen. This can be a really handy tool for when you don't want to look through the viewfinder. The self-timer is also incorporated into the drive mode dial, as well as mirror up. Now the purpose of mirror up is when people are shooting really slow shutter speeds, oftentimes they don't want to be touching the camera when the shutter releases. That can be either way. With really good, proper hand-holding or tripod techniques, I don't think it's necessary. But for those of you that definitely don't want to be touching the camera when you fire it, mirror up is the way to go.
So if I didn't have like a shutter release trigger, then I could use the mirror up?
Well, you can. Again, the shutter release is actually going to be better because mirror up just actually releases the mirror. You still have to depress the shutter release, but
so there's still some contact with the camera.
There is. So, and it's a good point because actually it reduces the shake from the mirror flopping, but a cable release is ideal and or proper shooting technique, which we're striving for.
Yes,
I mean, I know you shoot the same way I do in the fact that you want to get it right in camera.
Right.
That's why we're going through all these buttons and dials.
The less time behind the computer, the better.
Hear, hear. Well, we've got a few more here on this one. We've got quality setting. Now, depending on the type of shooting you do, you can shoot in RAW, which is the highest resolution and the most flexible format. RAW format actually captures all the detail and all the data that you've programmed into the camera, but when you get back to the editing software, if you find that you needed to make some tweaks before you process that file, you can actually go in and change white balance, you can tweak the exposure a little bit, and several other of the internal camera settings. You also have JPEG setting. For people who are shooting for email or the web, that's a great way to go. There's JPEG Basic, JPEG Normal, and JPEG Fine. For those who don't want to do a lot of post-processing, still want the highest resolution, I'd set to JPEG Fine. If you're doing simple email back and forth, JPEG Basic or Normal works well. Yep. How do you shoot? I'm
in RAW 100% of the time, I have to say, because the great thing about the software that's out there today is it's easy to extract the JPEG that's embedded in the RAW file. So if I ever need a JPEG, I can just extract it after the fact, and it's a fairly fast process. And you can see Scott Kelby's blog for more information on that.
Exactly. He had a great tutorial on there just a few weeks back. Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a few more buttons and dials here on this part of the camera. We have the white balance setting. Well, in the past, when you were shooting film, you always had to know what your white balance was, so you could buy the right film or the right filters to work in specific lighting conditions. With digital, the beauty is these cameras, again, are so sophisticated.
And
flexible, definitely. You've got auto white balance. The camera is very accurate. It's going to give you the correct white balance based on different lighting conditions. But you may want to add that creative touch again. So it's got some preset icons. You can set it for daylight conditions. You can set it for cloudy, overcast. If it's cloudy or overcast or shady, you tend to get a blue cast to your image. So by setting that, it warms it up. On the other end, if you're shooting in incandescent lights or interior type lights, you're going to get a very warm cast. By activating the incandescent setting, it's going to cool that down.
Right.
Now, you don't just have to use those preset icons for specific conditions. You can use them for creative control, which is a lot of fun.
Yes.
Additionally, you've got what's called Kelvin temperature. Every time I talk about that, I watch people's eyes glaze over, and rightfully so. Luckily, we don't have to deal with that. But for those who do, when you're shooting and really need a specific, particular white balance or really critical corrections, you can actually dial in a specific color temperature, or you can even do a custom white balance, purchasing an optional accessory such as an expo disc, and actually set the white balance, especially in mixed lighting where it can be difficult to dial in just that exact right white balance. You can custom set your own. For most purposes, I think those icons, the presets, are very good.
Yes, I agree.
Excellent. Well, we finally got one last button here, and it's called the ISO. That's the camera's or the sensor's sensitivity to light. You have the ability with these new cameras of setting to incredibly high ISOs and still getting really low noise. So why don't you always set to high ISO? Simply because you're always going to get the best resolution at the lowest ISO. I've shot up to 6400 and been absolutely amazed at the results I've gotten. Yes, there's noise, but it's insignificant compared to what the previous cameras had.
Right.
Let's move on to some of the other buttons and dials.